Welcome to Avoidant Decoded. If you're ready to understand the silence, the distance, and the mixed signals on a deeper level, you're in the right place. This space is for those who want clarity over confusion and truth over assumptions. If you resonate with this journey, consider becoming a member of Avoidant Decoded and go deeper into the psychology of connection, healing, and emotional awareness. Have you ever felt the moment someone gets closer to you and then suddenly disappears, as if something invisible pulled them back? Right when connection turns real, something inside them begins to resist it. Not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much, too fast, and don't know how to hold it. What looks like distance on the surface is often a silent storm underneath. And today, you're about to understand what that storm really means. Have you ever noticed how someone can slowly pull away, right when things start to feel real between you? Just as the connection begins to deepen, when there's emotional closeness, comfort, and something genuine forming, they suddenly shift. They become distant, colder, maybe even irritated without any clear reason. Sometimes they just disappear completely, leaving you stuck, trying to understand what went wrong, replaying every moment in your head, searching for answers. But what you're seeing isn't simple rejection, it's not a lack of interest, and it's definitely not emotional emptiness in the way most people assume. What you're actually witnessing is an internal conflict most people never recognize. When someone with an avoidant pattern starts to withdraw right after a meaningful connection, it may look like they don't care, but often it means the opposite. In many cases, it's the first sign that something real has broken through their emotional defenses. This isn't someone who feels nothing. This is someone who suddenly realizes they feel something deeply, and that realization doesn't feel safe to them. For them, closeness has never been neutral or easy. Somewhere in their past, vulnerability became tied to discomfort or even danger. So when emotional intimacy starts to grow, their system doesn't register it as love or safety. It reads it as risk, and the reaction is automatic. They shut down, they pull back, they create distance. Not because you did something wrong, but because something finally felt right, and that rightness is exactly what triggers their fear. This is where most people misinterpret everything. They assume distance means disinterest. But in avoidant psychology, distance often signals that the feelings are actually too intense, too fast, and there are no tools to handle them. They were never taught how to stay present in emotional closeness. Instead, they learned, directly or indirectly, to escape it. So when real attachment begins to surface, their body reacts before their mind can even understand what's happening. It shifts into a survival mode, fight, flight, or complete emotional shutdown. It's not calculated, it's not intentional, it's reflex. From the outside, that reflex can look harsh, cold behavior, mixed signals, sudden silence, or even pushing you away emotionally. But underneath all of that is something much simpler. Overwhelm. It's like being handed something fragile and valuable without ever learning how to hold it, without breaking it, or losing yourself in the process. And the deeper the connection feels, the stronger that defensive reaction can become. Someone who feels nothing stays steady, but someone who's starting to feel deeply can become inconsistent. One moment they're warm and present, the next they're distant and gone. Not because they're playing games, but because two powerful forces are clashing inside them, the desire to connect and the fear of losing control. That inner conflict creates confusion on the outside. But if you look closely, every shift, every silence, every unexpected reaction carries the same message underneath it all. I'm overwhelmed. I care more than I know how to handle. I don't know how to stay here without feeling like I'm losing control. This is where things often get worse. When someone pulls away, your natural instinct is to move closer. You try to fix things, explain more, close the emotional gap. But with an avoidant pattern, that response can actually increase their fear, because in that moment, closeness doesn't feel comforting to them. It feels overwhelming, even suffocating. So instead of calming their system, chasing can reinforce the belief that intimacy means pressure, expectations, or losing their independence, and they retreat even more. The paradox is this: the more you try to stabilize the connection from the outside, the more unstable they feel on the inside. But when you stop chasing, something shifts. Silence enters the space. And in that silence, they're no longer reacting to you. They're left alone with their own emotions, the very feelings they were trying to avoid. And that's often where the truth begins to surface. Because now there's no distraction, no external pressure, just their internal experience. And if the connection was real, that space doesn't feel peaceful. It feels intense. It feels loud emotionally. That's the moment where avoidance starts to crack, because the real trigger was never you. It was what your presence activated inside them. Genuine connection has a way of bringing unresolved patterns to the surface, not to hurt someone, but to reveal what was never healed. That's why the people who seem the hardest to understand or love are often the ones who need it the most, not in a rescuing way, but because their system was built to survive without safe connection, not to grow within it. At some point, they start to notice something unfamiliar, not just fear, but real feeling, not just distance, but longing, not just control, but attachment. And that awareness can go in two directions. Some people retreat further, convincing themselves the connection wasn't real or wasn't right, but others, those who are ready to face themselves, begin to shift. For them, the discomfort becomes awareness, the fear starts to loosen, and vulnerability, for the first time, doesn't feel like something to escape, but something to slowly explore. So when someone pulls away right as things deepen, it doesn't always mean the connection didn't matter. Sometimes it means it mattered enough to trigger something they've never resolved. But here's the most important part. You don't fix that by chasing. You don't solve it by explaining more or trying harder. What actually creates change is something much quieter, calm consistency, giving space without pressure, staying present without losing your own self-respect. That kind of energy does something powerful. It removes the pressure that fuels their need to escape while still holding emotional strength. And in that space, they're left with a choice they can't avoid forever. Keep running from what they feel, or finally sit with it long enough to understand it. Avoidance doesn't disappear just because someone is loved more intensely. It changes when someone is gently, consistently faced with their own emotional patterns. And sometimes, what brings them back isn't pursuit. It's realizing that what they were running from wasn't the connection, but their own fear of being fully seen within it. The deeper they feel, the quieter they often become. Not because the feeling isn't there, but because they don't know how to express what's happening inside them. Avoidant connection rarely shows up in obvious ways. There are no big emotional declarations or long confessions. Instead, it appears in small, subtle moments, a random message, a simple question with no clear purpose, a reaction to something you posted days ago, just enough to reconnect, but never enough to fully step in. And just as quickly as they show up, they pull back again. Because once the connection is reactivated, the fear returns with it. But if you don't respond the way they expect, something else happens. They don't just move on. They don't detach peacefully. They get stuck in a strange emotional space where your silence feels heavier than your presence ever did. This is what most people don't understand. Avoidance isn't about wanting less connection. It's about being afraid of how much they actually feel. They don't experience loneliness the way most people think. It's not about missing someone in a simple, obvious way. What they struggle with is the fear of being emotionally consumed, of getting too close to something they don't know how to manage. So when you stop giving them constant attention, something important changes. The sense of control they were holding onto begins to slip. You're no longer chasing, no longer reacting, no longer filling every quiet moment for them. And in that space, something starts to build inside them. Because now they're left alone with what they've been avoiding for a long time, their own feelings, their own attachment. At first, they don't label it as love. What they feel instead is discomfort, restlessness, thoughts that keep coming back without permission. There's a pull toward you they can't fully explain or justify. And because they don't understand it, they don't move toward you directly. They approach indirectly. They might show up in small ways, a random message, a reaction to something old, a simple check-in that doesn't go anywhere. It's not manipulation. It's the only way they know how to get close without feeling exposed. They want connection, but without the emotional risk. They want access, but without vulnerability. They want to be present, but without surrendering control. But even those small actions reveal something important. The connection is still alive. The emotional pull hasn't disappeared. And once you step back, that pull has nowhere to go. Your absence creates a kind of space they can feel, but don't know how to handle. And that space doesn't feel calm to them. It feels intense. Because what's missing isn't just your attention, it's the emotional balance they didn't realize you were helping them maintain. That's why they often can't explain why you're still on their mind. There's no clear reason they can point to. It just stays there, unresolved. They try to distract themselves, keeping busy, talking to others, filling their time, but none of it fully replaces what they felt with you. Not because you did more, but because at some point you stopped doing too much. You stopped chasing, and that shift changes how they experience you completely. When you pull back with self-respect instead of emotional collapse, you become something they can't easily define or dismiss. You become unfinished in their mind, and that's where reflection begins, not through pressure, but through absence. Your silence starts to mean something. It creates contrast, and contrast is what brings awareness. Some people respond to this by pulling away even more. They shut down harder, convince themselves it didn't matter, try to move on quickly, but others start to see things more clearly. Not in a comfortable way, but in an honest one. They begin to realize that what they were avoiding wasn't just you, it was how deeply they were affected. That's where real change begins. Because avoidance doesn't shift through pressure. It shifts when someone experiences their own emotions without being able to escape them. This is also why pace matters so much. When emotions start building too quickly, their instinct is to slow everything down, not to hurt you, but to protect themselves from feeling overwhelmed. They take longer to reply, they reduce how much they express, they create distance between interactions. From the outside, it can look like they've lost interest, but internally, it feels like they're trying to stay in control, because to them, closeness doesn't immediately feel safe. It feels intense, unpredictable, and consuming. And when someone has spent years connecting closeness with losing control, their instinct isn't to move closer, it's to manage the experience. They can't directly control how they feel, so they try to control the pace instead. Not out of intention to hurt, but out of fear that if they don't, their emotions will take over. This is where a lot of people misread the situation. They see the distance and respond with urgency. More messages, more effort, more attempts to fix things. But that urgency often increases the pressure the avoidant person already feels, pushing them further away. And so a cycle forms. One person moves closer for connection, the other moves back for safety. Both reacting, but neither fully understanding what's really happening. The shift isn't about chasing harder or disappearing completely. It's about staying steady, not rushing in when they pull away, and not withdrawing your entire presence out of frustration. It's about holding a consistent, grounded energy that doesn't change based on their emotional ups and downs, because that kind of stability communicates something they're not used to, connection without pressure. Over time, that challenges their belief that closeness always means losing themselves. But this only works if you don't lose yourself in the process. This isn't about becoming distant in return. It's about not lowering your value based on someone else's ability to meet you where you are. When you stop reacting and start staying grounded, something shifts in how they see you. You're no longer just another emotional experience they can escape from. You become something steady, something that stays the same even when they don't. And that's what starts to create reflection. Not chasing, not convincing, just consistency that doesn't break. As that continues, they begin to face something uncomfortable but important. The realization that their distance wasn't protecting them from you. It was protecting them from what they feel inside themselves. Emotional distance isn't the same as lack of feeling. True indifference is quiet and neutral. But when someone is reacting, pulling away, shifting around you, it usually means something is active underneath, even if it's hidden behind defense. Still, it's important to stay realistic. Avoidant behavior is often misunderstood when it's only seen as hidden love. When someone becomes cold, distant, irritated, or passive-aggressive after closeness, it's not necessarily pure love underneath. It's activation, their system responding to emotional pressure. What looks like detachment can actually be internal conflict. One part of them is drawn in, while another part is trying to create distance. That push and pull doesn't always mean deep love, but it usually means they're not neutral. Something is there. Jealousy is a good example of this. It rarely shows up clearly with avoidant individuals. They won't openly express it, because that would require vulnerability. Instead, it appears indirectly through tone changes, distance, short replies, irritation that doesn't quite match the situation, or acting unaffected while clearly being affected. At its core, this can come from attachment being triggered, the discomfort of possibly losing attention or connection. But it's important not to romanticize it. Jealousy can come from attachment, but it can also come from insecurity, ego, or emotional overwhelm. The behavior alone doesn't always define the feeling behind it. What tends to be most accurate is this. Avoidant individuals often feel things deeply, but struggle to hold those feelings in a steady, consistent way. So instead of expressing them openly, they manage them through distance, controlling how often they engage and limiting how much they reveal. It's not that the feeling isn't there, it's that they don't yet know how to stay present with it. What often shows up is a pattern of stop-and-go communication. A message here, then distance, a brief return, then silence again, often without any explanation. These small reappearances aren't always hidden declarations of love. More often, they're attempts to manage internal tension without stepping fully into vulnerability. It's not always, "I miss you, but I won't say it." Sometimes it's simply, I feel something, but I don't know how to sit with it safely. This is where your interpretation becomes more important than their behavior. When someone becomes inconsistent or goes quiet, it's natural to try to make sense of it. You might tell yourself they care, they're scared, they're conflicted, and sometimes that's true, at least partially. But other times it's just avoidance, not depth, not hidden meaning, just a limited ability to handle emotional closeness. A more grounded way to look at it is this: behavior reflects emotional capacity, not always emotional certainty. When someone doesn't have the capacity for closeness, even real feelings can come out in confusing or inconsistent ways. If that capacity grows, their behavior becomes more stable. If it doesn't, the same cycle keeps repeating: connection, overwhelm, withdrawal, distance, then re-engagement. That cycle can feel intense, but intensity is not the same as stability. There's also a lot of misunderstanding around silence. Yes, when you pull back, it can create space, and that space might lead someone to think about you, but it doesn't guarantee clarity, realization, or emotional growth. For some people, silence leads to reflection. For others, it leads to detachment, justification, or even relief. Silence doesn't create a specific outcome, it just removes your presence. What happens next depends on who they are emotionally and how willing they are to look inward. What actually shifts things in a meaningful way isn't silence as a strategy, but emotional regulation on your side. When you stop over-explaining, stop chasing mixed signals, and stop tying your worth to someone else's inconsistency, the dynamic naturally changes. Not as a tactic, but as a result of becoming more stable within yourself. And that kind of grounded consistency is what challenges avoidant patterns. Not playing games, not disappearing completely, but showing up with calm presence and clear boundaries. When it comes to emotional openness, it's important to understand how it usually looks. When someone with avoidant tendencies shares something personal, it often comes in small pieces. It's not a full emotional reveal. It's gradual. They test the moment, watch your response, then pull back to process. What they're really trying to figure out isn't just whether you'll judge them, but whether they can stay emotionally steady while being seen. Your response matters, but not in the way people think. You don't need to fix, analyze, or dive too deep. What helps most is staying calm and steady. No overreaction, no pressure, no making it bigger than it is. Just acknowledging it in a grounded way. That teaches their system something important, that closeness doesn't automatically mean danger. Over time, those experiences can help build their tolerance for connection. But this isn't something you can force or create on your own. It only works if they are also willing to face their own patterns. It's also important to be realistic about silence leading to some kind of emotional awakening. Silence can create space, but what someone does with that space varies. They might reflect, they might miss you, they might move on, or they might do nothing at all. There's no guaranteed outcome. What actually shows meaningful connection isn't how someone behaves when there's distance, it's how they show up over time. Consistency, effort, communication, and a willingness to work through discomfort, those are the real indicators. When avoidant individuals begin to grow, it doesn't just show up in their thoughts or feelings, it shows up in how they participate. They become more consistent, more direct, and less reactive to their own fear. That's what real change looks like. So the most grounded way to understand all of this is simple. Avoidant behavior is often about a nervous system trying to manage closeness, not a clear signal of love or lack of love. But if you start interpreting every silence or mixed signal as hidden emotion, you can lose touch with reality and stay stuck in confusion. Clarity doesn't come from isolated moments. It comes from patterns. And emotional security doesn't come from decoding someone's silence. It comes from consistency, mutual effort, and stability over time. At the core, this isn't about mystery, it's about capacity. Some people don't pull away because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much and don't know how to handle it. Their distance, inconsistency, and indirect behavior are often ways of managing that overwhelm, not clear statements about how they feel. But here's the truth that matters most. Love isn't proven through confusion, it's shown through consistency. If someone is truly aligned with you emotionally, they don't just appear in fragments or moments of intensity. They show up in steady ways, through effort, communication, repair, and a willingness to stay present, even when things aren't easy. Silence can create space, but it doesn't guarantee anything. It simply reveals where someone already stands. So instead of trying to analyze every withdrawal or read meaning into every return, bring your focus back to something simpler. Look at how consistently they show up. Look at how safe and stable the connection feels over time. Because real clarity doesn't come from guessing what someone means. It comes from what they repeatedly choose to do when nothing is being forced. And when you step back from the overthinking, one thing becomes clear. Real connection doesn't leave you feeling confused about where you stand. The truth is simple, but not always easy to accept. Avoidant behavior is not a clear measure of love, but a reflection of emotional capacity. Someone can feel deeply and still be unable to show up consistently, and no amount of chasing, decoding, or waiting can replace that missing capacity. Real connection is not built on confusion, mixed signals, or emotional guessing. It is built on presence, clarity, and mutual effort over time. When you stop trying to prove your worth to someone who cannot meet you fully, you return to your own stability, and that is where your power lies. Because love that is right for you will not require constant interpretation. It will reveal itself through consistency. And the moment you choose peace over confusion, you stop settling for potential and start aligning with something real.